And yeah, he just called me out of the blue one day, which is no small thing in and of itself to like get a call from Bryan Sutton. You know, it's pretty shocking.
Hello everybody, from Frets and Fingers, I'm Alex Pickard, and you're watching the Jam Sesh. Today we have a special treat for all you bluegrass aficionados out there. Joining us is none other than Marcel Ardans, better known as Lessons with Marcel. He is an outstanding bluegrass guitar player and a phenomenal content creator. From instructing at the Bryan Sutton guitar camps to being the go-to channel for learning about bluegrass, it is no wonder he is seeing the success he does. Marcel's authenticity and unique perspective, mixed in with his high-quality video production, make it almost impossible to click away from his videos when they pop up on your feed. Thank you for joining me from North Carolina. Marcel, welcome to the Jam Sesh.
Yeah, man, good to be here. Wow, you're hyping me up over there. I like it. You should just follow me around.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Before we get into this, you want to introduce yourself to the people who might not know you?
Yeah, my name's Marcel. I'm a bluegrass guitar player in North Carolina, like you said. Weird thing. YouTube just takes off sometime, and then your life goes in that direction. So yeah, I run a very popular bluegrass YouTube channel, I guess, and I also have a website, lessonswithmarcel.com. Lots of people go there to get tabs, sign up for lessons, and all that good stuff. That's what I do for the community.
Yeah, that's awesome. And actually, I just want to touch on that really quick. I thought, like, when you were first like, oh, check out my tabs, I was like, oh, I guess I have to pay for them. And I went to your website. I was like, oh, my God, this guy's literally giving away everything for free in terms of tablature. And I was like, okay, I think it kind of makes sense, actually, from a business perspective to have, like, the option to tip.
Yeah.
I think people are, like, so happy that you're providing this value for free that not that they feel like they need to give you something, but it's almost like then they can just kind of give you whatever they can afford, and I like that.
Yeah, it certainly works out nice for the consumer, but the real reason I did it, there actually didn't used to be a tip option. Originally they were just free, and I only added that because people kept asking, like, how can I give you something for all your work? And I was like, all right, donation. But no, my whole thought process was that I don't own the copyright for any of these tunes. I didn't write these tunes. I certainly don't have any kind of mechanical license or whatever you might need to, sell a tab book. And so it became clear to me that, hey, I'm doing all this work and it's shaky ground for me to sell it. It's actually shaky ground for me to give it away for free too. But, rather than putting it behind some kind of paywall, that seemed like the wrong thing to do. I love Tony Rice. I want other people to love Tony Rice. Why would I try to charge you for my transcription? I'd rather just spread the love around.
That makes a lot of sense. And the Tony Rice, you have like a book, like that was also free, correct? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's by donation.
I saw by donation. I think you posted on your Instagram recently. I saw that book and I saw someone flipping through it. I guess they had printed off all the sheets, and I was like, oh man, I gotta get into this. Like, as I said, I'm just kind of getting into the bluegrass world, and knowing any licks or any little runs would be helpful, as I only really know one bluegrass song at this point. And I actually think not accidentally, I didn't know I was using your tab for it, but I feel like someone on YouTube has your tab for it's billystrings in control, like where he's playing the Martin at some like vintage guitar shop. I think you said it was your most requested one, right? Or one of the most requested ones. Anyway, so that was the first bluegrass song I learned, and I think I inadvertently used your tab for it. But
that's so funny, man. Yeah, I wrote that out a long time ago for a fan, and they, I think they might have paid me money for it. I can't remember, but they emailed me and they were like, "Hey, if I give you $20, will you write this down?" And I did, and I just held on to it for a long time. And eventually, so many people were asking for it, and I just had it sitting there on my hard drive. I was like, "Well, here you go. Here you all go."
Right. And do you? How's that process of writing out those tabs for you? Like I've seen you start. Like I've seen you write them out sort of with that whatever program you have. But how has that been? Like that process, like learning to use that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. There's so many skills that go into transcription. I don't think people realize that it's kind of an art form unto itself. I mean, back in the day, if you did write a piece of music, you would give it to a transcriptionist who would literally write out hand sheets, and sometimes they would take what you've written and they would correct mistakes and stuff. They would like make things a little bit cleaner to read, and you do that a lot as a transcriptionist. You're listening to the song, but if someone, for instance, someone misses a note and there's just a click sound, not to dog on any of these players because they're all incredible players, but it happens to everyone. There's a little click right there. What do you do as the transcriptionist? Do you just write an X and say, I don't know what happened there? Or do you fill in the gaps and say, like, well, I know from experience. I've written down so many billystrings or Tony Rice or MollyTuttle. I've written down so many whoever tabs that I know what that note was supposed to be. And, there's a little bit of art in there because you can't just write it down exact because that's not actually what people want.
Right. That's fair. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate everything you're doing for the community. Because, like as I said, I'm just getting into it, and I'm starting to. I don't know. I feel like, the more you know, the less you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
As I'm getting into this, I'm like, oh wow, I know absolutely zero about this space. But anyways, so. You have this thing, or I don't know if you still have this thing. It's called Beer and Banjos. Is that something you still do? And maybe tell the audience what that is as well.
Yeah, Beer and Banjos is like where all the Raleigh cool kids hang out. That's like the bluegrass hang, and it's run by a guy named Hank Smith, and he started it a couple of years before I even moved to the area. And my understanding is that it used to be him. He's an incredible banjo player. It used to be him just shredding like Bela Fleck style banjo, and then the featured act would come on. And he eventually expanded that into like a house band. So there'd be a house band that plays initially, and then the featured act would come on. And the house band ended up getting some notoriety. I feel like I can't tell you all the people who have been in the house band or all the bands that the house band is open for, but the Beer and Banjos All-Stars have opened for acts like billystrings and stuff. And really, it's kind of a bar hang, right? It's like you show up with all your buddies, you play in the house band, and then the real band plays. But that band got good enough that they started getting gigs. And a couple of years ago, I moved to town, and they shook up the lineup. I got asked to play guitar for that. And it's such a funny gig, man. I think a way to explain it would be like it's a bunch of people who have done touring and have done like road work, and we're all sick of it. We all just stay home now, and it's an excuse for all of us to get together and play really well.
Nice.
And everyone goes home. But I stopped playing with those guys regularly. I don't know, maybe a year and a half or 2 years back, a while back. Just because it's a little bit of a commute for me. I live just outside of Raleigh, and so every once in a while when I see those guys, I'll sit in or I'll hang out. But yeah, if you're in Raleigh, you should check out Beer and Banjos. It's on Tuesday nights, and it's at the Raleigh Times building, and it's my favorite bluegrass hang in Raleigh. It's not really. It's got more of an atmosphere of like a rock show. It's in a bar, and it's real casual, and it's real friendly. And everyone's just hanging out and having a good time. Sometimes you go to these bluegrass shows and it's real, kind of stuck up a little bit, and like they're not serving drinks, and like, you sit down and you listen and then you leave and you clap politely. But this is like a real good time.
Very cool. And I guess for someone who's just getting into the bluegrass world, hasn't really ever sat down for like a jam or anything, like I'm assuming that wouldn't be you said it's, like they don't just invite anyone up on stage, right? It's actually a crew that...
No, that's a crew, yeah. There are some events in Raleigh that are like that, where they're jams, but they're stage jams. You walk up on stage and play into a microphone. And one of them is connected to Beer and Banjos in a way. It's like Beer and Banjos is like a franchise now. They have them in a bunch of different cities, and Hank just keeps running it and telling other people to have the event. But yeah, there's a Beer and Banjos in Cary, North Carolina, which is like a suburb of Raleigh, and they're called the East Side Ramblers, and they play at a Bond Brothers location, a local brewery, and they do have a proper jam. You can go up on stage and play with all the crew. And they run it in a really interesting way. They want the jam to be like healthy and constructive and good. So they play their opening set, as the house band, and then they slowly cycle out people from the audience. So, the guitar player gets swapped out or the banjo player gets swapped out, and eventually none of the original band is on there. but it ensures that like the quality is high and like things are moving well because the band stays up there for so long. It's really cool.
Wow, that is very cool. How about you give us some tips for someone like myself who have never been to a jam, like a jam, and is interested in getting their feet wet, for the first time?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely some knowledge that will really help you. These aren't things that everyone does, but they're near universal concepts. And one of them is how songs are called. And a lot of times when people say, "Hey, let's play X tune," they might give you a quick rundown of the chord changes, and they always do that using the Nashville number system, which is really intimidating to people, but I think I can explain it in like 30 seconds. So basically, if you take the key that you're in, and bluegrass is only played in a certain number of keys because the instruments have certain limitations. So if you had a song in the key of G, you count using your alphabet. G, A, B, C, D. Then you look at G, you look at C, you look at D. There's your 1 chord, your 4 chord, and your 5 chord. So if someone says, we're going to play this song, it goes 4, 1, 5, 1, or 1, 5, 1, C, G, D, G. And you can do that for all the popular bluegrass keys. So if someone called a song in the key of D, D as in dog, D, E, F, G, A. D, G, and A are your 1, 4, and 5 chords. So if someone says it's 5, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, 4, 1, it's A, D, G, D.
Jeez, that's I feel like you explained it like you've been teaching lessons for a little while or something.
Yeah, I've done that a lot. Here's one more tip. I'll give you one more tip too, is that when people are playing and they lift up their leg a little bit. So whether you're sitting or standing, people will lift their leg off the ground. They might even hold it out a little bit. And that is a signal that the song is going to end. And it can be done really subtly. In fact, you can do it on stage. Bluegrass bands do it on stage, where someone will just, give the boot real casually, and the whole band knows that we're going to end. Instead of shouting over everyone or instead of doing something else, you can just give this really subtle like foot move, and everyone knows that the song's wrapping up. And if you don't know what that is, you've never seen that, you're going to be the guy that's still strumming when everyone else stops.
Jeez, eh? And I think I like that about the bluegrass genre. I understand probably a lot of songs are structured, but it seems like there's quite a bit of a free flow to the songs. Like obviously you have your backing, like you said, your chords that are coming in, but then everyone's getting a turn, playing a little lead, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's very interesting, and it's a very like lively music genre in that sense compared to like I don't know. I've always kind of been into like the music genres where the song has the complete structure and there's not as much wiggle room, so no, that's really cool.
Yeah, I find that people struggle sometimes when they listen to bluegrass for the first time because they're used to this like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, out. They're used to like a pop song structure. And in bluegrass, it's always, solo, verse, chorus, solo, verse, chorus, solo, verse, chorus. Like that's the pattern. That's how it works because everyone has to get a turn to get in there. It's different.
Right, 100%. Like I went from, yeah. Anyways, it's okay. It's getting into this whole genre is crazy. I'm excited because I feel like it's a very challenging area to be in, I would say. But I'm excited about it's really making me put the effort needed to kind of get where I need to get. Like even that, like the In Control song, I'm still working on it. I think I'm up to 100 BPMs, but I know it's like at 135 or something. So and I've been learning it for quite a while, and no, it's okay. Like one step at a time, and I know I'll get there at some point. So, but we can, we can move on. So. Talk to me about the Bryan Sutton camps, man. Like for people that don't know what that is, maybe give a little background and then go into like how that opportunity came for you, and like maybe chat about your experience there. And I saw also in your most recent one that Ed Helms watches your videos. That must have felt pretty cool.
Yeah, Bryan Sutton, if you don't know, is probably the most accomplished acoustic guitar player living. He I think he really gained a lot of popularity playing with Ricky Skaggs, who of course had a country music career, but sort of returned to bluegrass and had an incredible bluegrass run that's continuing. And Bryan played in his band for a couple of years, and that might have been the moment that everyone really stood up and was like, "Whoa, who's this Bryan Sutton guy?" He's been involved in a million bluegrass projects that have done amazing things, but he also has this session music career. He is in the Nashville area a lot, playing on everyone's records. And so when you turn on like pop country music, even if it's a simple guitar part in the back, like a simple acoustic guitar strumming, it's probably Bryan Sutton. And the reason they're hiring Bryan Sutton for that is because he can come in and do it in one take. It takes him 30 seconds. And so he's very valuable in that world. But yeah, he might be, the acoustic guitar player that you hear most in your life. It's Bryan. And Bryan decided that he was going to make this camp for bluegrass guitar. And it's a wonderful camp, and it's a wonderful idea. And it's on a beautiful campus, too, in Brevard, North Carolina. And yeah, he just called me out of the blue one day, which is no small thing in and of itself to like get a call from Bryan Sutton. It's pretty shocking. But yeah, he called me, and we did a couple of interviews on my channel, and eventually he said he wanted to be involved in his camp, and it didn't work out. He was working on COVID stuff, and it was difficult times. And so when the second year came around, he was like, "I want you." And so I went down there the second year to do it. And it's amazing. It's so cool how he's put that thing together. It's basically all levels of bluegrass players. No one is a beginner at guitar, but there is even beginners to bluegrass there. And you get, clumped with players that are at similar levels or have similar issues or are learning similar things. He tries to make these pods that are really helpful, so you have like neighbors to work with. And then all the students get to cycle through all the teachers. And all the teachers, 5 or 6 or however many maybe, are famous bluegrass musicians. And for me, to be included in that group is a ridiculous honor because, all of the other musicians have wild performance credits. Those people have won Grammys and stuff. I've done all those incredible things. So for Bryan to pick me out of the muck and be like, "You're a really good teacher. You deserve to be in the group," it's pretty special. It's pretty special.
100%. But I think you do hold your own, man. Like I've heard some of your, I've heard you play, and I'm like, all right, this guy. I keep asking myself how you find time to do everything you do and still keep up with the guitar. So, anyways, yeah, I wouldn't sell yourself short in that regard. But yeah, and on top of that, you're also a great teacher, which I think you've probably gotten from doing these videos as well, right? Like the different.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even there was some funny moments at camp, because before we went to camp, I even told Bryan, I said, "Hey, look, I'm not a shredder like you guys, so don't expect, wild stuff coming out of my hands." And, the instructors do performances all day, every day. And, so one of those first times we're on stage, they were just burning a tune, playing so fast. And I was sitting right next to Bryan, and he looked at me like, "Do you want it? Can you handle it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want it," So the next break, the next solo comes to me, and I did great. I did fine, but it was a funny moment. Bryan remembered that I had said that to him, and he was going to give me an out. He was going to be like, "We'll skip you. Let's go to the next person." But my ego isn't going to allow that.
For sure. No, that's great, and it did well. So there you go. On
the
go ahead.
On the lessons thing, though. In terms of teaching, that was the weirdest, most random thing that happened. I was working a job at a toy store, and I actually got that job at the toy store because they saw how good I was with a yo-yo, of all things. And I ended up being like a manager and a buyer for that store, I climbed the ranks, but it was just a small local toy store. And the whole time I was gigging and trying to get good at bluegrass guitar, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And it just came to the point where I was like, I got to quit this job. I gotta get out and do the thing I want to do. And I had learned so much about how their business worked. I'd seen the internals of that small business so much that I was like, well, I'll just start my own business. I know what to do. And so I made a poster and I hung it up everywhere. And, me and my wife, then girlfriend, we talked about the poster, and she's like, what are you going to put at the top? And, I was like, oh, I'll put bluegrass guitar, and she's like, no, don't do that, because you like give lessons to people even if they don't want to learn bluegrass. And I was like, right, maybe I'll just put lessons with Marcel. And that was it. That's literally how we named the whole business, and then later on it's like, well, we got to make a website. What do you name the website? And like the poster is staring at me, and I'm like, lessons with Marcel, I guess.
That's awesome.
That's just how it happened.
That's very cool.
Yeah, man.
And in terms of like an instructor, I've heard you say tabs aren't evil; it's how people use them. So
yeah, man. I stand by that statement. Yeah, a lot of people talk about like how learning tab is going to hurt your playing. Don't learn tab. You should be learning everything by ear, which is weird because we know that classical musicians like exist. And what do? They like read written music. They're literate. So certainly being literate in a different language isn't evil. It's just it's just being able to read. And let me tell you, as a working musician, it is really helpful to be able to like write down your ideas and share them with another person. So if you aren't literate at all, you can't write these notes and give them to people. It's going to cost you more money at the recording studio, for instance, right? If I go into the studio, I can write notes for everyone, whether it's chords or whether it's little licks I might want in certain places or whatever. I can just give that all them, and it's instant. It's an instantaneous transfer because they can just read it back, right? But if I didn't read, then we would have to explain it at the studio, or I'd have to record it on my phone beforehand and send it to them, and then they'd have to sit there and figure it out. It involves a middleman the other way. And even though that can be beautiful and a fun process, man, sometimes being able to do it instantly is great. So you might ask, where is the problem then? I think the problem is that people read tablature like a classical musician would read sheet. You look at it as if it's God. You're like, this is the one way. This is the only way. This is how it has to be done. And that's not the truth of our genre. Bluegrass isn't that way. A fiddle tune like Red Haired Boy is, like 400 years old. It's got so many fingerprints on it. So many people have played that thing, that, this piece of music is older than the United States. So how do you, how could I possibly just write it down and have all of the detail and all of the important things included in there? I can't. But I can get you close, and I can give that to you, and you can go find all the mystery, and you can discover all the things that thousands and thousands of people before you have discovered. But the tab isn't the end of the journey. And if you're looking at it like the tab is the end of the journey, you're hurting yourself.
All right, I like that. That makes a lot of sense. And I think I'm someone who's guilty of that, of course. I rely on tabs heavily when learning songs, but I do understand what you're saying, because I've learned songs where it's like I've learned it to the point where I've performed them, and it's like I know it like the back of my hand, and that's going past the point of the tab, right, and getting into like the flow and really like feeling out the song for yourself, right? So I that resonates with me. I would agree. That makes sense.
Think about this one. You're talking about the In Control tab. So Billy's at this guitar shop in Nashville where they do all these demos, right? And he's basically selling instruments. They have these artists come in and they're like, hey, play these things and we'll make little videos and we'll sell the instrument, right? And, when you do that gig, you got to play, 10 different instruments or something, and you record a little audio snippet for each one. And I don't think Billy was thinking particularly hard when he started playing the chords to In Control. In Control is a big song. It's a whole band kind of thing. It's not even a Billy Strings song. He's just playing the changes from a tune and improvising around it and making stuff up. So if I write all that down and then you copy it, what you're copying is you're copying a dude in the moment who's like, oh, crap, I got to play something. What am I going to play? He randomly picked that. He randomly picked a bunch of embellishments. Maybe not randomly, his musicality came out. It's an artistic process. But you're reading that trying to be like, all right, step here, move my hand here. Like you're trying to like wear Billy Strings like a suit and do everything exactly like he did, but it's just a random moment in time, right? Instead, you could look at that tab and you could say like, oh, this part's interesting. Let's take this idea. Can I use that in another song? Can I use it for something else? Right? Instead of just reciting it, I'm trying to learn vocabulary, right? I'm trying to use something again.
Jeez, all right. Well, I definitely learned in control note for note. But I see what you're saying because he has his own playing style. So, like I could play out something because to be honest, like I haven't picked up a pick before. Like I was like 8 months ago to learn that song. Before that, I was finger stylist 100% for the last like 5 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know who Lindsey Buckingham is. He's
Yeah.
from Fleetwood Mac. Yeah, so I learned his whole like every song he does like solo where he's done his like own fingerstyle rendition. I learned them all, like learned them really well, and then going to pick up the pick, I learned like the basics of In Control, and then I saw your video of how to hold the pick properly, and I was like, well, shit, now I got to relearn this whole thing because I was holding the pick wrong.
Yeah, totally.
And I did get myself. I ended up purchasing myself. I spoiled myself with a Bluechip pick.
Nice.
After seeing, we're gonna get into this because okay, this is a two-parter because I don't want to talk to you about Billy Strings because I saw a video you made that was really interesting. But I saw a rig breakdown with him where he's talking about the Bluechip picks and the TP48, and I was like, all right, like let me just get one of these and see what it's like. And I'd actually gotten, I think you called them the fake Bluechips, the prime tone, like the 3-pack. I
Yeah.
purchased that first in the triangular shape like that, and I was like, let me give these a try and see how it feels because I've been used to using like a softer pick, like a medium. So going to this like
Totally.
heavy pick with no give, I was like, what am I doing here? So yeah, I found it quite interesting to kind of move over to this one. So okay, there's like
Well,
threw out like 9 ideas here. So go ahead, and then I'll try and
yeah.
hit you
Well,
with a specific question.
let's talk. Yeah, let's talk about the pick thing. I mean, think about where the genre comes out of. So it's like the early 1940s. Bill Monroe and his Bluegrass Boys are playing shows. They're like, putting the sound together. The sound is, you know, it kind of hits like an interesting peak at 1945, and that's when we normally say bluegrass like really happened. I won't go into all the specifics, but that band is happening, and what do you have in that band? Man, you got a fiddle player, and fiddles are so loud. You got a mandolin player. Well, a mandolin has 4 strings, but every string is doubled, so there's 8 strings. Let me tell you, those things are super loud too. You got a banjo player. That's just a bunch of strings attached to like a drum head, and that thing is a cannon. So what's the guitar player do? Well, luckily Martin Guitar Company has come out with the dreadnought-sized guitar, these big guitars, so of course you got to play one of those. And if you want it to be loud, I mean, you got to use a real pick, You have to use something that's got weight to it. And luckily, around that time, these picks were the standard. This is a tortoiseshell pick. Don't go out and buy a tortoiseshell pick or anything. They're kind of illegal, and they're rare to come across by not terrible means, but you can. And these are a very kind of rigid material. It's not even so much about the thickness, it's about the rigidity. They don't want to give, right? I mean, hypothetically, if you had a guitar pick, that was like, 1 millimeter, that was like, or, a quarter of a millimeter or something, that was a very thin. If it was rigid, it would still do the same job because what you want it to do is push through that string and really drive it, right? So that's why that happened, right? Our musicianship is a little stifled by the instruments that we have to use. We have to use massive guitars, and we have to use, in the modern day, a Bluechip, right? Something like you just held up. And that's the only way that you can really get enough volume to compete. And maybe that seems silly in the modern day because you're like, why do I need volume to compete? I can just plug my guitar in and turn it up. But back in the day, they were all sharing one microphone. That guitar player would go up to the mic and hold his guitar out and play. So if you were going to do even just the simple little licks that the guitar player would do back then, like a G run here or there, I mean, still, to be audible, you got to use those implements.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I remember seeing Mumford and Sons live, and they all stood around one mic with a little light bulb above it, and they played a tune. And man, like some people were like shouting, and he's like, "You guys need to be quiet," like we're.
Yeah.
And no, it was a really cool show to see everyone stand around and everyone just kind of play the part into one microphone. They really had to focus on that balance. And I guess talking about the Bluechip, what type of Bluechip do you have? What size?
I play a TAD 50 or a TAD 60, mostly the
Okay,
60.
interesting. I actually interviewed the owner of Bluegrass, like of all people. I don't even. I just reached out to a bunch of people. I bought the Bluechip, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to the guy. I want to talk to him. I want to understand why this thing costs 35 USD per
Oh,
pick.
you talked to
And
Goins.
yeah, I talked to Matthew Goins. Yeah, I had it was about a 30-minute interview with him. It's on my channel. He didn't want to go on video, but I spoke to him over Instagram there, and I
Cool.
posted up on my YouTube. But yeah, he's a super nice guy, and he kind of dove into the manufacturing process about it, and yeah, so I kind of decided I was going to make. The reason I did that is I'm going to be making a Bluechip video at some point about trying to figure out why this is such a popular pick. So that's kind of, I'm hoping to ask you a question and then maybe include it in my video if you're okay with that. But
Yeah,
why
sure.
why do you feel that Bluechip picks have become such a popular name in the bluegrass world?
Yeah, so um, the thing that we started with, the tortoiseshell, was the standard, and people played these. I mean, through the '60s and stuff. I mean, you could buy these at music stores, but they became illegal because the hawksbill tortoise was being hunted to extinction, and that's why we don't buy them anymore. Any picks, hopefully, any tortoiseshell picks that you get like this are from reclaimed tortoiseshell. So people find these old like jewelry boxes and hand mirrors that had tortoiseshell in the back. They pry it off and they turn it into a bunch of picks and they sell it to bluegrass musicians. And this particular one is actually from a big slab of tortoiseshell that my friend found in the back of the fiddle shop that he works at. And the owner had purchased it legally back in the day, but never used it. So weirdly, this might be the only one I've ever seen. This is a completely legal piece of tortoiseshell that was purchased legally back in the day. And so what happens after that gets made illegal is, of course, pick manufacturing becomes mostly plastic. And they had made them out of plastic previously. One of the first guitar picks that they made in the teardrop shape was for a guy named Nick Lucas. You can look him up. Nick Lucas was, I guess, a little bit of a novelty act, but he sold guitar picks with his name on them, and they were in a teardrop shape. And by some accounts, that is the very first guitar pick looking guitar pick. But different things happened, the war effort, blah, 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 and the plastic picks just weren't cutting it. Bluegrass musicians were always looking for different things that would replicate the sound of tortoiseshell, which they could no longer get legally. And they found casein. And casein is like a milk byproduct. I don't know exactly how it works, but I know that if you hold a lighter over a casein pick, it smells like burnt milk. They can look like a lot of things. Sometimes they're a little see-through. This one's just white. It's got an 8-ball on the other side. It's from Dr. Herringbone. But the casein picks tend to have a problem. This particular model is supposed to fix it, but casein, it being like a milk protein, when it heats up, it wants to deform. So if you keep a casein pick in your pocket and it's just constantly against like your warm leg, eventually it'll get like a weird bend in it, or it'll get like a little bizarre. But they have the interesting property that they wear and can be shaped the same way that tortoiseshell is. So it was like a really close solution. A lot of people really like that. But by happenstance, yeah, I mean, as you probably learned in your interview, this guy figured out, that there's this NASA stuff that they use on the spaceship or something. I don't know where they use it. And it happens to be very rigid, and you can make guitar picks out of it, and it's very expensive to buy a sheet of it, so these picks are very expensive. But I think that's, if I could tell it as condensed as possible, that's what happened. Now, Bluechip isn't the only one. There's also something like this. It's called the Tone Slab. And the Tone Slab picks, excuse me, I've lost it. The Tone Slab picks are made out of something similar, but I don't know what their production process is. I haven't gone into that whole thing. But I know some people like the Tone Slabs better than Bluechips. I'm still on the fence. I like my Bluechip.
Right. Yeah, I saw you did an interview with, I'm going to get this wrong, the Guitar Shop, I believe it was, recently. It was posted. And you guys did like a full rig rundown.
Oh, the
And
acoustic
yeah,
shop?
acoustic shop, that's what it was. Yeah, and I actually really liked that interview. And you went through like you broke down which strings you use. I find it interesting that so many bluegrass players use Diodario non-coded. I cannot, for the life of me, get on board with the non-coded. I've been an elixir guy my whole life, and they're like the coded elixirs. And now I kind of want to switch because it's like $10 a pack instead of like the elixirs I'm over here almost like 25 or something a pack. So I feel
Well, I'll
yeah.
tell you this, in my performance career, when I was, really making a go at that before, YouTube became like my full-time kind of passion. Um, I think the most I ever played was like 150 dates in a year, which is a lot. Is a lot for someone with like no notoriety too. No one knew who I was or anything. I was just gigging with different bands, and yeah, playing a show every couple days throughout the whole year, you really burn through strings, especially playing bluegrass. It's a really heavy genre to play. And so I would change my strings at least once a week. And a lot of times right before a show, and I would just stretch the hell out of the strings before I went on stage so they would stay in tune. And if you're going through that kind of volume of strings, eventually it makes sense to just buy the cheapest string, which is the EJ17, which is why everyone buys these uncoated cheap strings. If you buy, like the bulk pack of the coated ones, which I do now, I fully admit that I do now, what is it? It's like $500 or something for like the big bulk pack of them, so you can just like pull out string after string. And that just wasn't cost effective. That wasn't something I was able to do back then. And I think that is just like the habit that carries over with these bluegrass musicians. They're like, these strings sound good. They're super cheap, and I'm going to be changing my strings a lot. So just like keep them coming.
That makes a lot of sense. And I met this guy during my, I don't know if you've seen anything on my channel, but I do it where I go up to people in public and ask them to play a riff from my channel. And I met this guy who from Montreal, and his name's Jono. And anyways, he was talking to me about how he also uses a Diodario non-code, and he was saying how he likes his strings to be dead as possible, so the guitar sounds as much like the guitar as possible. I don't know anything about that, but I think that's what his understanding was, or his reasoning behind using those. But I don't know if you have any
No,
insight
this
on
is
that.
this is a totally different situation, right? Like you want a fresh string that sounds bright as hell because once again, you're going to be competing with a fiddle and a banjo and a mandolin, and like the acoustic guitar compared to those things is not very loud. So yeah, if you get some fresh strings on there, you get, if the weather's good, you might get 3 hours of just like, banjo killing sound. But if if it's a sweaty day, I mean, I've definitely played a gig where my uncoated strings have died halfway through the first set. I've done a string change during a set break because it's so humid out.
Wow. Jeez, eh?
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
Uh,
And
but I
oh
get
my
I
god.
get what that guy's saying, but that's just not bluegrass. That's not what most of these guys would do.
No way. Okay, interesting. Um, so let's maybe talk about. Let's change gears a little bit and talk. So I heard that you have, or sorry, I heard, I've seen, I've noticed that you have hearing aids. So how has that been as a musician, like a full time like musician, and then also in terms of like jams when you're at a jam, like what like how do you set yourself up to make sure you don't run into any problems during those, like while playing?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure, man. There's some extra considerations. Um, well, I didn't lose my hearing from like loud sounds or anything. A lot of people think that. I think everyone assumes like he's a musician, he wears hearing aids, like he probably blew out his eardrums standing next to a drum set. But no, I have like a genetic thing called otosclerosis, and it basically freezes up the bones in your inner ear. You have some abnormal bone growth, and so these frequencies don't vibrate across those bones as well. And it's genetic. My father has it too. Probably a bunch of people in my family had it before my father, but I've worn my hearing aids since I was like 6 years old because of that. So my situation is a little bit different. Since I was a child, I've been trying to manage that and make that easy in my life. And there's lots of weird, interesting stories I could tell. Like my mom used to sit me down and make me look at her mouth while I practiced like saying things, because she didn't want me to have a lisp or anything. She wanted my speech to be really clear. And I think that might be the reason that I don't have a lisp, is because my mom was patient enough to do that. But when I first got my hearing aids, I heard like birds for the first time. It's a it's a pretty serious hearing loss. I can't function anywhere without hearing aids. Say it that way. I couldn't order at a restaurant or anything. And so yeah, when I started playing music, the first thing that really stood out to me was that I was using my eyes a lot more than most people. And I still do to this day. If I'm at a jam and I want to make sure that I'm in time, a lot of times I just can't hear my own guitar. It's too quiet. All the sound is shooting away from me, and all those other instruments are so loud. But I know what I'm playing well enough that I know that I'm playing appropriately. But to make sure I'm in time, if I can't hear, I normally look at a mandolin player or I look at a bass player. Instruments that I also know how to play reasonably well, and I can, visually see what they're doing and make sure that I'm in time. And yeah, there's been some funny times where I've had, like I show up to play a gig and they've sort of set up the sound rig in like a sort of an oval shape, and like I'm at the front of the oval, and I'm like, oh, this isn't going to work. I'm not going to be able to like look at hands, right? I can't see people's hands. Why am I at the front of this thing? So they like invert it so I'm at the back and everyone else is in my eye line. That stuff tends to help a lot. It's difficult though.
No, I can't imagine that. Like, good on you for being able to, tackle that, that issue. Like, not issue, but like,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, quite frankly, it is an issue. Like when you're on the gig or doing whatever, playing live music or in a recording studio or whatever, everyone else is fully equipped, and you do have some kind of deficiency that you have to overcome. You have to prove that you still deserve to be there in a way. And sometimes it's not easy, Also, hearing aids run on batteries. And if you're in some weird place in the middle of a gig and a hearing aid battery dies, what are you going to do? I've been on a gig with, if you change them both at the same time, then they'll both die at the same time. So don't ever do that. I still, to this day, don't do that. But, I did that when I was a kid, sure enough. And they both died within like 5 minutes of each other while I was on stage at a gig. And it was just unreasonable to think that I could continue like that. And so we were at a bar, and I told the rest of the band to like play something that they could play without me. They played a fiddle tune or whatever. And I walked out into the bar, and I looked for all the old dudes with hearing aids. I finally found one, and I tapped him on the shoulder, and I was like, hey, do you take... They're kind of marked by color, like orange or brown or whatever, blue. And I was like, hey, do you take, the brown size? And he was like, yeah, I have some, in his pocket, like old man style. He pulls it out. He's got like, a couple of hearing aid batteries. And I was like, great, man. And he hooked me up. And then I went back on stage. But it's it's tough sometimes.
Jeez, that's pretty cool. He hooked you up. So I got
that trick doesn't work anymore because hearing aids are rechargeable. No one carries batteries. I still run on batteries, but everyone else has moved on.
You got to step away from the set, plug in your hearing aids, and wait like 20 minutes. And go back. If you were.
That's exactly why I didn't move on. That's exactly why I'm still on batteries, man.
That's fair. Do you get a warning though, like that they're gonna die? Like, does it beep once or twice or something? Low battery.
Yeah, you get depending on the manufacturer and everything, but yeah, you do get a warning beep. But it doesn't help a lot if you've forgotten to put hearing aid batteries in your gig bag and you're already on stage.
Yeah, no, fair enough. All right, so I got one more question for you before we get into like the content creation questions, because that's kind of like where my kind of desire is with this whole YouTube space. But I do love talking about guitar and just the different stuff, because that's one of my passions as well. So, and I know you probably get this question a lot, but I thought it was really interesting what you said in an interview. So let's talk about billystrings. And I watched the video, sorry, not an interview, it was your video about why people dislike him. And I really appreciate the tone and message of that video for a couple reasons. One, I think you're right. Like, people are like now being exposed to the bluegrass space because of him, and like myself as well. You know, like the first video I saw of Billy was actually not even a bluegrass video. It was he did "Don't Think Twice" by Bob Dylan, and then I kind
Yeah.
of saw some of his other stuff, and I was just blown away by this guy. I was like, how can he play so fast with it? He's just flat picking, and then kind of once I started getting into the bluegrass realm, I was like, oh my god, okay, there's like he's just one of many. You know what I mean? Like anyone in this realm of bluegrass is like just like absolute a killer on the guitar. You know. So, anyways, so maybe let's talk about that a little bit. For the viewers who don't know, you said, you know, that he's bringing a lot of attention to the bluegrass space, but there's something about like the OG bluegrass people that feel like he's not paying homage to like the original like feel of bluegrass. I think that's what you're kind of getting at, right?
You know, there was a weird moment in the scene, and it's still going on to some extent, where I think a lot of like classic bluegrass fans and listeners, you know, it's kind of a dying genre. I mean, to be completely honest, Billy is the first thing that's breathed new life in it for a while. And that means that the fans of the genre are aging too. And that leads to a little bit of this like gatekeeping attitude that is like, oh, he has, you know, tattoos, he's got gauges in his ear, you know, what are you doing? And they don't want to accept that he's actually quite talented. He's quite interesting. And I think a lot of people misconstrued my thoughts in that video too. There's a lot of people that didn't watch that video carefully enough and didn't realize that it was a pro Billy Strings video. There's a lot of people that thought that I was anti-Billy Strings in my messaging, which is funny because me and Billy are buds. I talked to Billy Strings on the phone last weekend. You know, like, there's no bad blood there at all. Billy's seen the video. His mom is a fan of the channel. Like, it's we're fine. And yet people want to create drama there. And really what I was getting at, kind of like you were saying, is that the tension is that these new fans are coming to bluegrass through Billy Strings, and they're saying things like Billy Strings is the best guitar player ever, right? No one has ever played bluegrass like Billy Strings. And Billy Strings will tell you that those statements are false, right? Billy doesn't want to be an idol, and he's not claiming to be the greatest guitar player in the world. And people who put those words kind of in his mouth, I think that's what actually angers, you know, the traditional bluegrass fans. You know, they're ready with their pitchforks, and they're like, Billy Strings isn't the best, Tony Rice was the best, or Doc Watson was the best. You know, or Clarence White was the best. You know, they got all these opinions on, you know, the history of the genre and who all these great artists are. And the new fans are still figuring that out, and I think we need to give them a little patience, a little grace, because they will. And Billy's doing so much to inform people. Billy is on stage mentioning names like Doc Watson and Tony Rice and Clarence White. And I think that's doing great things for the community because his fans are going back and finding those older people. And not to knock Billy in any way, but it's funny too, you know, I have a lot of students that are big Billy Strings fans, and then they come to take lessons and they're like, you know, Billy's still awesome, but like, I'm kind of a Tony Rice guy now. You know, like they get exposed to like the other stuff, and they kind of change their mind. You know, maybe in their first lesson with me, they were telling me that no one has ever been better than Billy Strings, and then when they like actually get in the genre, they're like, oh, there's more than one. You know, there's a bunch of guitar players you can love in the bluegrass space.
100%. And I think for me right now, the person I've been watching the most is actually MollyTuttle. I know she's newer to the space, not newer to the space, but I know she's not like one of the OGs, you know, like you were talking about Doc Watson, Tony Rice, but man, some of her stuff is just unbelievable. I've found the tab for this one. It was also at the Vintage Guitar Shop, and I fell in love with the sound of whatever riff she was playing. I can't find the name of it, but that's kind of the next project for me is one of her songs. But yes, I can see that, like, now that I'm exposed to the bluegrass world, I'm starting to see all these other people. And the guy I talked about from Montreal, Jono, he introduced me to Chris Eldrige as well, who I know was I think he was at the camp with you at the most recent Bryan Sutton camp. He had actually
me and Chris Eldrige are buds too. We did a me and Chris Eldrige are buds too. We did a video with him recently, and And I actually talked to him on the phone, I think last week too. We were talking about something he did with Chris Thile. Doesn't matter. But yeah, I mean, Critter, they call him Critter too, is a great example.
Right. Yeah, he has this one. So the guy John on like for my Do You Play Guitar series, he had played Fair to Partly Cloudy, like the intro riff to that, and man, that's such a nice like lick. I don't know if you know the one I'm talking about, but yeah, just a gorgeous lick.
Yeah,
Anyways,
yeah, totally.
All that to say, yeah, just getting into the bluegrass world. Yeah, Critter, Chris Eldrige. Yeah, okay, that's why his Instagram handle is Critter. I was like, what's going on here? And then I did notice you had a interview with TreyAHensley. I think it was just at the whatever award ceremony, and you said Critter, and it kind of clicked. I was like, okay, so I guess he just goes by Critter.
It probably helps, Critter is in the Punch Brothers, and that's Chris Thile and also Chris Eldrige. They got two Chris's. So I think I'm sure that was his nickname beforehand, but I think that might have been the thing that like really made it stick. So that way they weren't two Chris's.
Right. Okay. That's funny. Yeah. And also TreyAHensley, man, that guy just smoke comes off his guitar, man, when he plays. Like that guy's got power.
Yeah.
I remember seeing a video of him doing.
Trey was.
Sorry, I was just gonna say I saw him do a video of like he did like the theme song from Barbie, and he just like it was absolutely insane. And I commented, I asked him like, how long does it take you to put something like this together? And he kind of just said, he had mentioned he'd been playing a long time, and it was not that it was on the fly, but very much similar to your comments about Billy during the his vintage guitar sessions, where he's kind of just rolling with like an idea, and that just blows my mind, man. That like, yeah. Anyways,
it's a very creative genre. There's so much of that going on. That's part of what's expected of you in the genre. You're expected to be just a hell of an improviser, and you should be able to take any concept and turn it into, amazing bluegrass music. Trey's a great example of that. Trey was actually background on that too. I think Trey was the first person in the bluegrass community, like the first kind of pro that I became buddies with, and he did some work on the channel. So Trey will always get love from me because he was one of the first people to like legitimize what I do a little bit.
Right, and he's got an outstanding voice as well. I was only watching him on Instagram, like his reels, and then last night, literally at work, I was doing some I was watching your interview with him, and then I went and saw some of his covers, and I was like, man, this guy's voice is just outrageous too. Like, he's just a well-rounded musician. Like,
yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to some content creation.
It's wild.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I think there's quite a bit of a delay here. I feel like I finished talking, and then I'm like, okay, he's quiet. Let me keep talking, and then. So I think there's a bit of a delay, which is weird because we're in the same time zone. I thought, there wouldn't be a delay, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it is weird. I don't know what's going on, but it's all right.
Yeah, no problem. Are you pressed for time right now?
No, go ahead.
No. Okay, so I got a few more for
I'm
you.
good.
Okay, awesome. So, as I mentioned in your intro, like your video quality is like top notch. So I know it's not just you turning on the camera and going ahead like straight into it. So like talk to me about building out a video for your channel. What goes into it, and how do you end up with such a high quality product? What do you focus on, and how are you pushing the envelope, trying to improve on them? And maybe you can use your new podcast as kind of an avenue for explaining that, or we can kind of talk about that after. It's really whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting that how that process kind of develops, because if you look at the first videos on my channel, it is me just turning on the camera. I think that's how it starts with a lot of YouTubers, and then you realize like, hey, maybe my words could be more concise if I, made an outline or wrote a script. So it's all been one massive learning process, and I think a lot of people look at some of the work we put out now and think, wow, that looks really professional, but it's taken us longer than I'd like to admit. And yeah, nowadays when we start a video, There is a crew of teachers that I manage that teach guitar lessons, and so if you sign up for lessons on the site, you might not necessarily get me. You might get another teacher that I endorse. They're all amazing players with amazing resumes that for whatever reason have come over to work with me, and we normally hop on our sort of our company meeting, and we throw out a bunch of kind of dumb ideas. And weirdly, it's kind of the dumbest idea that normally wins. Admittedly, a lot of these videos, they might be interviews or something like that, and in that case, we don't have to brainstorm. But when we do brainstorm, normally what we're looking for is like a concept that's educational and interesting, but also has this very childish thing to it. For instance, one of our teachers is very well known for writing this very interesting arrangement of Turkey in the Straw, and he won the national flat picking competition with it. He's like a 3-time winner or something. He's incredible. He's the best guitar player out of all of us, and his name is Andy Hatfield. And so in that call, the pitch was, hey, what if I tried to learn your impossible arrangement of this fiddle tune, but I had an insane time limit. I had an hour. We all laugh. Oh, that would be fun. And then Andy says, if you buy me a turkey suit on Amazon and ship it to me, I'll review your performance dressed as a turkey. And that's the thing that makes it, right? Then it was a video that was in production. We were good to go and we were golden. Another example was that, I wanted to do like an AI generated fiddle tune. I thought that would be a really fun thing to do, like an instrumental tune, but a robot wrote it. And it turned out that someone had built that. It's called Folk RNN, and you could just generate a million fiddle tunes. And I couldn't figure out what to do with it. So instead of it being a company call, because I wanted to, well, actually, I didn't know yet, but I didn't bring it up in the company call in any case. I went to ChatGPT, and I was like, hey, how do I make this a video? Me and ChatGPT brainstormed. And the robot suggested that I prank my friend with the robot fiddle tune. And I was like, that's it. That's a video. It's like interesting. It's educational. People are going to learn a little bit about bluegrass music. But also we have this weird AI prank thing going on, which is super childish and juvenile. And I love it. Same with the turkey costume. I think those are some of the best videos that we put out, or at least my favorite videos we put out.
No, for sure. And in terms of the podcast, I feel like there's a lot that goes into that. So I actually listened to your most recent one yesterday, and I really, honestly, man, like I was kind of blown away. Like the whole concept is very cool, and I know you said you were kind of doing some of the artwork for it, so maybe we can dive into that. But yeah, I really like that there's like somewhat of a storyline, and then followed by you guys. There's two of you just talking about some history about Gibson, and I thought that was really, really informative. I learned a lot just listening to that. I think it was only 30, 40 minutes or something. And I was entertained because even the visuals are very cool. So maybe where did the inspiration come for that, and how do you build one of those out?
Yeah, there was another. We call them blue tubers. There's another bluegrass YouTuber that named Eli Gilbert who does banjo stuff. Me and him were going to start a podcast, and the two of us had this hilarious idea that we would call it Podcast with Marcel, featuring Eli Gilbert. But in actual fact, behind the scenes, it would be a 50-50 split. and that was just so comical to us that you would name it just after one person and then do a little like featuring in tiny print. And that idea fell through, and it didn't end up happening. So I went to Hayes, one of the folks that works for me, Hayes Griffin, and I was like, we should do it. We have the rapport to like make this great. And so it became Podcast with Marcel featuring Hayes Griffin, which is the dumbest name for a podcast. Once again, excites me in that way. And I didn't tell Hayes anything about what the podcast would be. We just set a shoot date, and then I spent an absurd amount of money. I won't even say the number on on all of the like intro audio, and paying a voice actor to be our robot bartender, and just doing all of this behind the scenes work, all of this setup, and all of this world creation about who we are and what our job is. We we fish for hydrocarbon on Saturn's moon Titan, and all of this kind of stuff, because it's a space-themed bluegrass podcast. And so then we show up on the first day to like hit record, and I'm like, all right, Hayes, I recorded an intro. I'm just going to play that intro. And then if you see the podcast, it's this very dramatic, almost like Star Trek opening. And Hayes has no idea what's going on. It's like a lore drop for him, right? He just like learned who he is, who his character is in this universe. And I just started talking to him normally. So if you listen to the very first episode, which isn't animated, it's literally Hayes figuring it out on his feet. And so it's very funny. But in the couple episodes that have come since that, we decided we wanted to animate it. We were going to pay someone to do it, and then I said, I'm just going to do it. And something about marrying, the sci-fi thing with the bluegrass thing, it's like something, more new, this kind of like Star Trek vibe, with bluegrass, something that is older, is a really neat thing to just shove them together. And I did the same thing with the art style. I was thinking like, well, this is a sci-fi thing. It could all be very sci-fi and very, it could all look like that, but wouldn't it be funny if I drew it in like a 1930s, like rubber hose animation comic book style? So that's what I did, right? Almost like I'm taking the animation style, from the time that bluegrass was getting on its feet, and I'm using that as the medium to tell the story. So we're these rubber hose characters, and each episode starts with a comic book that, like you said, does the continuing story, and then we just chat about whatever bluegrass topics, and normally there's a little skit in the middle that is also a comic book, and that's how it works, man. It's insane, but it's not a whole lot of work. We come up with the script for the comic book, but then we just sit down and hit record, just like we're doing right now.
Yeah, but I think the animation part, that like I was looking at that, man, like it's very well done. Like I wouldn't even know how to begin animating something like that, or even drawing something out. Like, what kind of programs are you using? Like Paint 3D wouldn't do what. Wouldn't do that. So.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, the thing that I did was I had drawn those little characters for just like the logo, for like a little. Just like logo for the podcast. And so when we went to animate it, a lot of that work was done. I had drawn a bunch of different feet and hands, and I do visual art on the side. Any t-shirts you ever see or anything you ever see from Lessons with Marcel, it's almost always designed by me. But yeah, I drew those characters in Illustrator. I drew all the backgrounds in Illustrator. And, and then when I had to animate them, I had to draw all the different mouth shapes. And luckily, that part I can automate. So in the Adobe suite, there's a program called Adobe Character Animator, and I can drop all the graphics in there and drop all the audio in there, and it will sync the mouths to the audio. And that is incredible, because otherwise it would take a prohibitive amount of time.
That's really cool. I did not know that was that feature on there. Jeez, eh? That's
Yeah, it's really cool though. That was also another little surprise for Hayes. We kind of talked about it. We talked about paying someone, and and I think I just sent him a test animation, and I was like, "Hey man, I figured it out." Like a week later, I'd spent all my time working on this thing, and I just got to surprise him with it. And that was very fun.
That's very cool, man. No, I really like I like the podcast. It's new, it's fresh, and like I said, I really like that there's that like continuous story throughout each episode. I haven't listened to them all there, but I've listened. I think I listened to the first one. I remember it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't animated, and then I listened to the most recent one just to freshen up on it before our chat here. So, do you have any future I guess ideas or plans in the pipeline for your channel, or just kind of like you said, keep meeting with your staff and just keep running with new ideas?
Yeah, that's the plan, man. I think the channel has kind of migrated from it being me teaching a very specific, like, this is how Tony Rice plays the song Old Train. And it's kind of migrated into this, like, general, bluegrass, almost like cultural stuff. We're interviewing a lot of people who are telling stories about, different eras of bluegrass, and we're getting to tell that in a visual medium, which is very fun. I would have loved that back in the day, because I read all these biographies and I just thought, man, why aren't any of these documentaries, right? Why isn't there a way to like take this in visually too? So I think we're filling a niche there, and I'd like to do that. I'd like to continue to do more commentary and make it as educational as I can. I'll certainly still keep teaching, guitar as an instrument, but I think there's something broader there that people are connecting with and is growing the channel in a really interesting way. It's not just bluegrass guitar players that are watching the channel. There's, bluegrass mandolin players, fiddle players, banjo players. There's people that don't even play bluegrass. There's so many different people that it seems weird for me to be like, here, let me teach you this guitar lick. I'm really not talking to the whole audience when I do that anymore.
Right, that's interesting. I can appreciate that. And so, in terms of what are some tips you would give musicians or guitar players or anyone that you think is in your follower base that's trying to go the content creation route with their career? Actually, you know what? Let's focus on guitar players maybe, because I feel like that, or musicians.
Sure.
What are some tips you would give? Because that's my channel is definitely about that. Like I'm trying to build out a platform for like using guitar, but like in somehow not really teaching or playing it myself for the camera, if that makes any sense. And I think, like you said, you've kind of evolved to that point too, right?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of good content that people want to consume is kind of the thing that I talked about earlier. It's sort of like A plus B. And I think when a lot of people sit down to make a video, they only come up with A. So they think, wow, no one's made a video about X, but what would really make that video good is X plus Y. That's what I'm talking about. And it's such a hard thing to learn. I feel like doing YouTube for a decade is certainly a way to learn it, but getting more pointed advice would probably be helpful. So look at what you do with your instrument and think, man, how am I going to create content that's interesting to people? Is it going to be, for instance, there's that Japanese guy that plays all the super weird electric stuff. What's his name? Like Ichitako or something? You know who I'm talking about?
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
What's his name?
I don't know the name off the top of my head, but I watched something with him like actually recently. He was at some, convention.
He's so cool. Look at his videos. His videos are like really crazy guitar playing in all kinds of unconventional ways. But then he puts like a bizarre title on it. The title is like, when your girl leaves you at Taco Bell at 2 a.m. Like it's something weird, right? And that is it, right? That's a really simple example of like A plus B. It's like really technical guitar playing at a level that's like hard to comprehend, plus like him not taking it seriously with the title.
Right.
And if you go to make that video and it had just been his like, super cool guitar playing with a very pretentious title, no one would have clicked on it. So that's my advice for YouTube. And some people are starting to say and think that YouTube is a little bit of a dinosaur, that it's not worth, going through the rigmarole on YouTube because it takes so much time to produce content here. But to me, YouTube is such a good way to show value because it's really hard to get subscribers on YouTube. Not to knock anyone's hard work on any other platform, but there's more people on TikTok with 1 million followers than there are on YouTube, right? It's hard to get to that, whatever the big number is. It's hard to get to that on YouTube. But on those other platforms, people might be more willing to click that follow button or that subscribe button. I think that's true of Instagram too. But for whatever reason on YouTube, people are real scared of clicking that button, which means when you do get them to click that button, it really means something. You really have that person. I won't name any names, but I have a friend who's very popular on TikTok who makes guitar content. And he recently confided in me, and he told me that he loves his fan base, and he loves that he's got 1 million people that are, watching his stuff, doing whatever the number is. It's bigger than that. And he said the problem is that he can't get them to go anywhere. So if he makes a tab or he sells a product or he wants to give guitar lessons, people won't actually go to his bio and like click the link. People will just consume all the content, keep hitting follow for more. They're not going anywhere. Whereas all of my fans on YouTube, even though I have a much smaller number, not even at 100,000 yet, all of my fans are so dedicated. They want to look at everything I do, and they're so eager to like help with community projects and like make more bluegrass stuff happen. It's weird, It makes me think that like if I had to do it all over again, I'd still put my money in YouTube, I feel like.
Right. And I heard you talk about, building a connection with your audience, and I think that's what I believe watching your content, that's what you've done right, is you've built that connection with your audience. And even though like 60,000 subscribers is a lot in my head, I'm at like 1,000, so, it's 60 times the followers. But no, you've built
Right.
these quality subscribers that, when there's a call to action, if you ever bring out a call to action, you have a higher conversion rate possibility, and at the end of the day, at the end of the day, you're not making content just for fun. Of course it's fun, but this is your business, and you're trying to put food on the table for your kids and your family. And so going the route you did, I think, is 100% the correct way. And I watched this guy. His name's Dan Cohen. He's all about like the digital economy, and he talks about that, building a connection with the audience. And that's something I'm slowly working on, because I had a hard time being on camera. And now that it's been like 9 months I've been making videos, I'm like, all right, let's roll this. Let's start talking. And even doing these interviews, the first 2 interviews I did, with my intro, I'd stumbled so much on the person's intro, and I felt bad because I put so much time into the intro. Where today, I felt like I was able to tackle your intro properly. And no, I think like 100%, man. I'm impressed with what you've done, and like you've definitely bumped up the quality, because I scrolled way back to your first videos to see, and you're right, you just had the camera put it on, and now you got proper lighting, you got a nice backdrop, the quality, like the camera quality is great, so and the sound quality is amazing. So I don't know, man, it's impressive for sure.
It's a tough thing to decide where you're going to put your efforts when you decide on a career in social media. But I think for different people, different things are going to make sense. So I'll say that if you were going to do a career like this and you wanted to put all your apples in Instagram, well, then I wouldn't make hyper-produced content, And maybe it seems even obvious to say, but the stuff that really, goes crazy on Instagram is, shot on a cell phone. For instance, Jake Eddy is a very popular bluegrass guitar player that has a massive Instagram following. And majority of his videos are him just setting up his phone and, just going. And we chat about content creation, and it's funny because I'm over here like, yeah, my next 12 videos are planned through March. I know what I'm going to be doing with every hour of my life so I can get, hours and hours and hours of content done. And Jake Eddy shows up to work and is like, all right, well, here's my office, and turn on my phone. And sure, he might take a bunch of takes and stuff, but, he's living within the bounds of, of that algorithm, of that ecosystem. And I think sometimes people make that mistake. I've seen some content creators that I'm close with try to make very overproduced stuff for Instagram or for TikTok, and that's just not the place. And I personally have tried to post some of my very produced stuff on those platforms, and I'm like, this isn't the place. If I want to pour in hours and hours of editing, YouTube is my home.
Right. And I think you're right. Just to loop back when you're talking about TikTok, like I posted one of my Do You Play Guitar series, and it popped off, and I got 50,000 followers from one video. But like you said,
Right.
like there's not as much value there. There was like an influencer who had like millions of followers, and then she went to like a convention, and like she had like 3 people show up. You know what I mean? Where it's like a YouTuber like yourself with a strong fan base, you could go to a convention, and you for sure would know you would have more than 100. Like you would have 100% have more than 3 people show up for it, right? So I think
Well,
YouTube
I can
is
tell you
definitely-
when I go to IBMA, like when I go to IBMA, like the awards show, I mean, yeah, I've been genuinely swarmed, which is funny because I don't think of my following as that massive, I mean, there's even bluegrass YouTubers that have larger followings than mine, sort of doing the same material. Like Jim Pankey does it for banjo, and he's at 100K. I love him. I love his content and everything. But, it's funny to me that going to a bluegrass space, I mean, yeah, I get recognized. I mean, I was at the bar the other day, like the brewery near our house, and this guy walked in, and he walked past me, and then he like walked backwards, and he was like, "Are you that guitar guy from YouTube?" That's funny. It happens.
Geez, that's pretty funny. And so, how do you find the balance, I guess, between, because you said the next month you have like lined up for content, and I, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you were holding a baby up to the camera recently. I don't know how recent that was, but so like if you have your family and then you have your content creation, like how do you kind of
Yeah.
find that balance and then also find some time to play guitar, with such a busy schedule?
Yeah, it is a busy schedule, man. I mean, so I accepted the role of artist in residence for IBMA 2023, which is that award show that I'm talking about. That's the big bluegrass event. Sometimes people call it Bluegrass Prom. And every year, everyone gets together in Raleigh, soon to be somewhere else. And, we have this big award show. We have all of these performances in the street. You have a big, all these vendors. And they asked me if I would basically, show up this year and shoot all these interviews and all this content. And we shot so much content that if I had released a video every other week, I would be releasing content until the event happened again. And so I realized that that was not okay. And I had to start releasing videos every week so I could eat through this content. We did too much work. We did too good at our job. And so, yeah, even though, we just had our first, our baby was just born. It's kind of been crunch time for me because I've been trying to get, sometimes a 40 to 50-minute video done every single week, which is a lot of editing. The weird thing is that I think since having a baby, I've been playing guitar more because the baby likes the guitar playing.
Nice.
And I don't think I had that excuse before. Before I would just sit at my computer and just, maybe you can tell, but I'm kind of a workaholic. I'd be here in this chair anyway, whether we were doing the interview or not. I'm just constantly working on these projects. And I mean, the video that came out this morning, which was an interview with Tim Stafford, I finished it at, I think, 9:30 a.m., and it was published at 10 a.m. So I literally worked on that till the last second because the deadlines are so tight right now. There's so much content to get out. Normally, I have 2 weeks in between videos, and they're all original ideas. So this is a really strange part of my life right now. Like, everything's already been filmed. Like, the content is there. I just have to, assemble it. So I'm just an assembly line right now.
And so you edit all your videos or some of your videos? Do you?
Yeah, I edit all my videos. Every once in a while, I have help. And back in the day, I used to have help with live stream highlights, but I stopped live streaming when the baby came up. So yeah, it's really just me, and I love it. I would never complain about that. I really love the art of video editing, and it's so strange. But as I get older, I would even say that my thing, like who I am, is becoming less guitar player and more like production guru. I'm like the guy who can edit whatever you need in the video and create whatever graphics and draw whatever art, and I'm a production manager. I'm not a guitar player anymore, and sometimes I'm not even mad about it. I kind of like it. It's fun.
Jeez, eh? Yeah, see, I'm a bit worried with this whole thing because we have our first baby on the way, expected in a few months, and just getting the baby room ready. And I work shift work as well, right? So trying to balance that with now the family coming, and then still trying to grow this platform.
Oh yeah.
This is something I'm very passionate about. I've been, studying the power of social media for a little while, and just kind of trying to come up with some ideas. And I think this seems like it'll. I've to be honest, besides the Do You Play Guitar series where I go out in the public and talk to people and try and get them to play a riff for my channel, I'm really enjoying these interviews, and I know there's a lot more work goes into these than the "Do you play guitar" series, because I just walk up to people and they play something. It's very straightforward. Where this, I spent probably at
Yeah.
least 3-4 hours researching you, like at least, you know what I mean, worth of just watching through some of your content,
Yeah.
doing different things. So it's a lot more time consuming, but I'm quite enjoying it, and like building these connections with different musicians and hearing their stories. So I don't know where I kind of lost track there, but yeah, no, I think I'm just a bit worried about that, like kind of managing my time and ensuring I'm still being a good husband. There's a lot to this game.
It is tough. Me and my wife, we keep, his name is Tipper. We keep Tipper here at home with us too. And so throughout the day, it's, we almost have like shifts, which is actually very fun. It's super cool. I don't know if this is feasible for you or not, but I love, having the kid around, and it means that like my work time is kind of like half play time. It's like, how do I keep like Tipper involved, or like, can I set this down for a while and like play with him? And like, he's just in here, just hanging. And sometimes, yeah, I get to pick up the guitar and like play a couple songs for him and stuff. And it's very fun. I couldn't imagine like I couldn't imagine like living the life where it's like, all right, go to like daycare, and we'll see you again in like 8 hours. Like, it's so much fun to just have your like kid hanging out.
Right. 100%.
Uh,
That makes a lot of sense. And see, my wife, she's going to be off 18 months, and I'm hoping by the end of that 18 months, there's going to be enough. I've built out enough and done enough work here that we're able to. Because for me, I don't want a daycare raising my kids. You know what I mean? And like some people, they have no choice because they're so busy. But like,
yeah,
my idea is to be able to have enough like financial freedom between my actual day job and through this content, through my platform, that I'd be able
totally.
to have her not stay home, but like have the family at home, and we really have this like family unit, and we just raise them the way we want to. But actually, on that note, so monetizing yourself as a professional guitar player, I went through your website. I see, so you got lessons running, you got the tabs, which of course are just donations, and then you have your YouTube channel, which you're getting your monetizations. Like, that's a lot of income streams. And I know you talked about it in an interview where he's like, well, it kind of just happened because people were like, oh, I should just teach guitar lessons, so I taught guitar lessons, and then like, oh, you should sell T-shirts, so I made some T-shirts. But like, I feel like that kind of takes away from like all the work that went into what you did. Like, you definitely put in all the effort. You made those things happen. It's one thing to be like, oh, I could sell a T-shirt. Yeah, well, you actually went ahead and made that happen. So maybe talk to
Yeah.
me or us about like, yeah, all your like how you monetize yourself so well, and then maybe any future plans you have in that sense. If you're okay going into that, I know, because it's more like a business question.
No, for sure. Yeah, it's a tough thing to figure out, and I think I was terrible at it for a long time. Um, I mean, the reason I say that is because I used to get these emails where fans would literally write like, "How do I give you money?" People would just be like, "Hey, I watch all your content and I want to support. Like, hey, do you, is there like a donate button? Like, literally, I just want to give you money." And I felt like kind of embarrassed and weird about it. I was like, man, what am I doing? And yeah, and that's basically when I started listening to the community, and they started saying things like, sell T-shirts or do this or do that. And inside of that, is a lot of culling of ideas, right? Sometimes people suggest stuff that you're just never going to do. Or sometimes, ideas are just so niche that it doesn't make sense to produce it. But, if you're able to listen to all the things that your community might shout at you, they will tell you what they're ready for, which is really interesting. And not something that I ever considered when I started this, but I think a lot of people get into content production. They're like, all right, I'm going to like make my Discord, I'm going to make all my merch, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And your community isn't really ready for that. And maybe when your community looks at you, they're like, man, this guy's trying too hard, Whereas if you just wait for them to yell at you, You know, you wait until they're really hungry for it, and they're like, "Where is our Discord? Why don't we have an official Discord, or why don't we have official merch?" Then you finally make it. Then they're all excited. They all run out and buy it. And that was not a master scheme by me. That's just literally what happened. Whoops, you know. Um, but I would say diversify as much as you can, and I would say that um, if you can create interesting merch that is on brand and has a very clear value statement, you know, if you ran a YouTube channel that was all about planning and organization, and you could sell a calendar, perfect. You know what I mean? Like, whatever you sell as a musician should be on brand to give value to your audience. And that doesn't mean selling music, which is maybe the hardest piece of advice for a lot of musicians. But whether you want to admit it or not, I think everyone views music as being free now. You know, you just watch it on YouTube, or you know, or you get on Spotify and it feels like it's free even if you're paying for it every month. You know, people don't see music as a commodity that involves a transfer of funds. You just get music. So if you're a musician and you're trying to monetize yourself, hopefully you have a personality and some ideas, because it's not going to be selling music. Unfortunately, it's just not. And I don't even, you know, for me, the merch isn't even a big one either. That doesn't sell great. It sells fine, you know, enough for me to keep it live and keep doing it. But you know, the tabs sell a lot better, and you know, the lessons sell a lot better. The things that people associate me with, they associate me with learning. So all of the like learning based stuff I have on my website sells well. I even think it's kind of strange that people would walk around with a Lessons with Marcel t-shirt. Like, you're advertising your guitar teacher? And so it's wild that people do. Thank you so much. But that doesn't seem like it makes as much sense as them going out and buying like a book, you know, that I wrote.
Right. I think, man, I think it's pretty cool. And I guess you don't have any shirts at the moment, right? You said you're going to be kind of getting back into that game soon. I know you sell the hats with the different serial numbers on them, which are really cool. I don't know if you want to plug that. You can plug that right
That's
now.
right. Yeah, so there's no shirts right now. Basically, we had a fulfillment problem, and I wasn't happy with the quality. And then we started a deal with someone else, but it kind of fell through. So we're looking at other ways to get shirts back online. It's not the highest priority for us, but I do want to do it. And knowing me, I can tell you what's going to happen. I haven't admitted it fully to myself yet, but I already know that I'm going to buy a screen printing rig, and I'm going to print it myself. Once again, I haven't fully accepted that, but I know that that's going to happen in like 4 months. Because I'm insane. Because I learned how to animate cartoons in a week for a podcast, you know? Yeah.
Right. So you're
It'll
able
happen.
to, you'd figure out all the kind of things you need to do. Because I looked into that too. You know, like for the future, whenever I've built out my, I have this idea for these like comedic shirts for like kind of involving bands, but I won't drop that yet. I don't want anyone, you know. But yeah, the whole idea behind that, and I was looking into the different
Stealing your idea.
Yeah, well, yeah, I won't give you the. But anyways, it doesn't matter. But the whole point was I was looking into the print on demand, and my biggest worry is like for me, I would like this gonna like I'll be like dramatic about it, but like I'd rather sell my shirt for $80, and when the person like my follower open it, it's like wow, this is high quality. Then sell one for $35 where it's like comes in, it's not really what they expected. You know what I mean? Like I would have no problem selling something for $80 as long as it met the expectation or exceeded the expectation, right?
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, if that's what you want, we're getting into the nitty gritty now, but if that's what you want, then you should just buy bulk. And of course, the problem with buying bulk is that you actually hold stock, you know, so you're left with 1 million extra smalls and 1 million triple XLs. But that's kind of the way to go. I agree. If you want a quality T-shirt, then you should just do it for real. But if it's print on demand, yeah, they're not screen printing them, right? They're using different print methods that they can do, one-off designs. Whereas if you really truly screen print something, you want to do like 200 of them, So
Right.
it's a tough bag to deal with, man. But in the back of my mind, I think to myself like, well, that's what you're good at, though. You're the production guy, right? Surely you can figure out how to make T-shirts, and I think I will.
That's cool. And then like at least then you have the quality control, right? And then you're giving your audience like something of quality, and you can stand behind it. Um, so
Yeah, yeah, totally.
yeah, man. I got one more for you if you want, and then we can wrap it up. It's been an hour and a half. I didn't think I was going to hold you this long, but it's been a good chat, man. So your album Trader, I actually went and
So
listened
fun.
like this last week. I listened to the album. I listened to the whole thing. So I guess that's the interesting part with you is because you're also a content creator, but you've also put out an album. So I think you got this like unique experience where you've seen both sides. So like what for anyone who's kind of in like a musician or a content creator, like what are some of the do's and don'ts you learned along the way of creating this album? What do you like about the process as well? Like.
Oh man, yeah, what a big thing to unpack. Um, I mean, if you're a creator and you're doing something, some other artistic thing like that, you shouldn't expect an amazing response. And this is the second album that I've put out since I started doing YouTube. And I think that first time I kind of had my hopes up. I think I was thinking like, oh man, people watch me on YouTube, everyone's going to go listen to the album. And once again, that's not what people know me for. People know me for like teaching and talking about bluegrass. So sure, some of them might go over and listen to the album, but that I didn't think it was going to be some brilliant, just mind blowing success this time because 60,000 people want to listen to me talk about bluegrass doesn't mean 60,000 people want to listen to me sing.
Right.
And that could be a hard pill to swallow. But yeah, man, I mean, the production of that album, it was a COVID album, and it was kind of a little bit of a novelty project in that I'd written this song called California, and I sent it to my buddy Jack Devereaux, who played fiddle on the album. And I was like, hey, what do you think of this? It's kind of a goofy song about me and my wife on a road trip, and we were just talking trash about every state that we went through. It was just like this ongoing game that we were doing, like, oh, this place is the worst. Can you imagine living here? And even though there were some states that we had lived in before, and Jack listened to it and was like, yeah, that's fun. That's great, man. And I ended up programming this drum track on it. And I was doing these like kind of cheesy 80 drums, a la Newgrass Revival in the 1980s. And specifically the song Do What You Gotta Do. If you listen to Do What You Gotta Do by Newgrass Revival, that was like the guiding star of the whole project. And of course we're making it more complicated and weird in different ways, but we basically wanted to do a bluegrass record with drums because I showed the demo with drums to everyone and they were like, man, that is hilarious and weird and great. Let's do it. So it was kind of like you got to like sit down and like try to be that member of Newgrass Revival. You're like kind of what would they play? And those were even some of the notes that I got from Maddie Whitler, who played mandolin on the record. Yeah, I remember her sending me some takes and being like, yeah, I feel like Sam Bush would have done like a little fill here, so like I added that. But we all just like existed in this vibe, and I love it. Like, quite frankly, if I do another record, it's going to be a continuation of the same kind of sound because I really like that 80s bluegrass sound with drums, and it doesn't exist anymore. Someone's got to keep it going. One thing about the production that I'll say, which was very unique, is that it's hard to find information on dealing with situations like that. For instance, bluegrass instrument with drums. And if you're ever in that situation when you're working on an album like that, you should try all kinds of different solutions. And I don't know if this would be interesting or useful to anyone, but I'll give an example of something that we found on that record that I've never heard of before. Basically, if you're running a compressor, you can sidechain that compressor so that way something else causes it to fire. As in, every time a bass drum hits, it can make the bass guitar get quieter, right? So they occupy that same sonic space. If you hear both of them at the same time, it might be noisy. So you might want to just turn down the bass guitar every time that bass drum hits, right? And that's used all the time, especially in like dance music. You know, you'll hear this like really flabby compression where like every time that kick drum hits, like all the other instruments duck out a little bit. It's actually called ducking. And when we made the record, we had this problem where the drum set where the snare drum would hit was also where the mandolin chop would hit. And it was that same problem. You have both of these sounds at the same time. So the solution would be to sidechain this compression so that way when they hit at the same time, the mandolin gets quieter and you hear more snare drum. That's what like a dance record would do, or something like a pop record or a rock record. And I realized that it sounded more like bluegrass if you did the opposite. Every time they hit at the same time, it actually turns down the snare drum and you get more mandolin chop. And it does the same thing with the bass guitar. Every time the bass drum hits and the bass hits at the same time, it actually turns down the bass drum so you get more bass. And that means that the record prioritizes the sound of the bluegrass group even though it has a drummer on it. And that was just the most interesting novel solution in that record. And like it blows my mind away that I even had the idea to do that, because it's so against conventional like mixing theory. It's just not how you're supposed to use that tool. And I think it sounds great on the record. But yeah, if you're in weird situations and you're trying things like that, you should be experimenting with all that stuff, because sometimes you find something really interesting that will actually set the music apart.
Interesting. I feel like that was a good lesson into audio engineering, as I'm just kind of getting into the audio stuff, trying to make sure my sound sounds okay. And I've been YouTubing a lot of different things, trying to balance my levels, and I'm having a horrible time at it, but we'll get there one day. My next piece is to get it better.
That's a whole nother mess, man.
Yeah. And the last quick one for you. How much, I've been asking this to the last couple of people I've interviewed, how much did you make for your first ever paid gig?
Oh, how much did I make for my first paid gig? I'd have to think of what my first paid gig was. I think I was playing drums with a band for an art walk in Prescott, Arizona. I think that was my first paid gig. And I want to say I made $20. I think that's true. But yeah, there was I played drums throughout school. And there was this like mother-daughter group that would sing together, and the mom played guitar. And they wanted a drummer. And I was kind of the best drummer they could find. And I was only 12, 13 years old. And they were, more like, I think the daughter was like maybe 19 or 20, and the mom was older. I don't remember. But they hired a 12-year-old to play drums for them. And I joined that band, and I actually gigged with them for a while. We played a lot of shows together. And that was my first like gigging experience. I wouldn't call it professional, but it was casual, but it was still a lot of dates. And that first gig was at an art walk. I can picture the art gallery. There might even be a picture of it. Yeah, I think I made like $20.
Nice. Good stuff, man. That's great. Look how far you've come.
Look how far I've come.
There you go. But Marcel, I don't know if you have anything you want to shout out for your channel, what you've been up to. But I won't hold you any longer. And like I said, I just really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come and chat with us and give us your 2 cents, man.
Yeah, no problem, dude. I'm happy to hang out. It was a good time. If you're interested in what I do, you should definitely check out the YouTube channel, Lessons with Marcel. You can also check out my website, lessonswithmarcel.com, to get all those free tabs or to sign up for bluegrass guitar lessons from one of our amazing teachers. Other than that, the only real fresh thing we got is that podcast that I mentioned. We just put out, I believe, episode 6 of the podcast. That's all about Gibson stealing some of their most famous guitar designs. It's a real fun listen, and it's some history that doesn't get told very much. So check that out if you're interested.